Let's talk about your college football playoff field, because you released this, I believe it was in the last week, and you and I align on a lot of things. We differ on a couple, but I want to talk about your conference champs here. You got Georgia winning the SEC. You got Ohio State out of the Big Ten, Florida State out of the ACC, and Utah out of the Big 12. So walk me through this top four really quick. What went into those champs for me?
Yeah, so the way I kind of did this exercise, JD, was I used the parameters of my preseason top 25 to then make kind of these postseason predictions. And so I had Utah as my highest ranked Big 12 team. I think the Utes, when you have Cam Rising coming back, Brent Kuki, the tight ends back, you bring back the running back. I mean, they were just completely decimated by injuries a year ago. I think Kyle Whittingham is a top 10, borderline top 5 coach in the sport. So he's transitioned this program in and out of conferences, I think two or three other times. I don't see them missing a beat in 24 if they can stay healthy. So I have them as my Big 12 champs. I think Florida State, for all that they lost, I still really like what they have defensively. I think Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. are just going to be beasts off the edge. And while I am skeptical about kind of the ceiling that DJU provides at quarterback, they may just run the hell out of the ball. It may not matter all that much against Florida State's schedule. So I think with Roydell Williams and the guys they have there, they kind of did the Alabama East thing where they went to Tuscaloosa and brought, 5 or 6 guys from the Tide after Nick Saban retired. So I still have them kind of a cut above Clemson and Miami for the ACC. And then I think Georgia and Ohio State kind of, are self-explanatory. These are two of the most talented, deepest teams in the country. Kirby Smart, his comments yesterday, I think were on point in terms of, that football maybe isn't quite being played as well, as cleanly as it has been in the past, because there has been this kind of suck of depth from all these programs. And yet I would say the pushback on that is that Georgia still benefits more than anybody because they are able to stack up some of these 4 and 5 stars that other programs don't have. So, this is going to be a season, JD, and we've talked about it a bunch. You might have to win 15, 16, 17 games. So even if you lose a couple, and we're going to have to train our minds, it's not going to be a perfect season. There's not going to be a ton of 12 and 0s and 11 and 1s that are making the playoffs. It's going to be a lot of 10 and 2s. And so if you lose a couple games, Georgia, that's okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, that's okay, because then you get into the playoff and you still have the deepest roster. So that's how I kind of landed on those 4 conference champs.
Before we get back to Jesse, make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. It's college football. It's nothing but college football every single day. We appreciate y'all in advance for locking in with us. Yeah, Georgia is fascinating because Kirby Smart is saying, hey, I have less quality depth than I've ever had. And it's like, well, if the rich people are eating off paper plates, like what's going on with the middle class? Like what's going on with the rest of college football? So I don't think Georgia's hurting by any stretch. You and I are in lockstep there. One thing that I thought was maybe worth unpacking is Ohio State as your Big Ten champ. Ohio State, I believe right now, is favored to win the Big Ten. I'm all in on Ohio State. The thing that I'm having trouble squaring is what to make of Will Howard. What do you make of Will Howard as it pertains to Ohio State and their outlook in 2024?
Yeah, you're all in on the Ducks. You're quacking. You got the quack going, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's less about Will Howard than maybe everything that's around Will Howard. Now, I do think that he does the one thing that Kyle McCord could not a year ago, and that's offer something with his legs in the red zone. Ohio State really struggled to score touchdowns, to punch it in, kicking way too many field goals last season. I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue when you have the element of Howard's legs plus the addition of a Quinshon Judkins and a healthy Trevion Henderson. So he's not afraid to throw the ball deep. That was something that Kyle McCord also kind of struggled on. So while I don't think it's a serious upgrade, that maybe some in Columbus believe, the fact that he's lost a little weight, the fact that Ryan Day has been effusive in his praise, I'm at least concerned about that position compared to where I was a year ago, and just everything else on the roster. I mean, when you account for what they did NIL-wise, bringing back all these seniors who are trying to become, from day 2, day 3 picks to day 1 picks, and then, let's get a cherry on top, and added Caleb Downs, it's tough not to like what Ohio State's done, at least roster wise.
They really got Caleb Downs just because they felt like it, which is just a ridiculous thing to add to that defense. The thing that terrifies me, Jesse, is how good that run game's going to be, which you mentioned with Will Howard and his legs, and I think they have the best backfield in America, but the way that Chip Kelly is going to utilize it with how diverse it sounds like they're going to be in the run game, I think that's just going to be a problem for the rest of college football. No Wisconsin on here, but I do want to jump around a little bit. Michigan at number 9. So I saw you put this out, and I was like, gosh dang it. Like, shoot, I think he's right. Because everyone's saying, oh, they'll be 9-3, yours truly included. And it would be just like Sherrone Moore, just like Michigan, to go 10-2, kind of backdoor their way into the college football playoff. What do you think about Michigan, and why do you have them in this group of 12?
Yeah, I'm clearly on the opposite side of, I think, almost everybody else in the national media on the Wolverines. I'm not selling them just because they lost 13 guys to the draft, and Jim Harbaugh, that their best coach of all time, is no longer in Ann Arbor. I'm still banking on kind of a continued continuity of just what this program discovered. Now, you can insert your own Connor Stallions joke there if you want, but I think it's illuminating to say, hey, I ranked the 10 most impactful players in the Big Ten. I've been going through these. It's obviously a subjective list. I don't have like a formula that's like A plus B plus C equals D to spit it out. I take into various accounts. But I think it's certainly notable for everyone saying, oh, Michigan, doesn't have this talent or has lost so much. They had 4 of my top 10 players, JD. They have 3 first-round draft picks on defense. They probably had the best tight end in Colston Loveland on offense. So while we have no idea what we're going to get from Alex Orji, if he's even going to win the job, but if they use him kind of like Jalen Milroe, but maybe even run him a little bit more than Alabama did a year ago, you lean on Donovan Edwards. I love that for as much as they did lose, defensively. I think Josiah Stewart, the Coastal Carolina kid, is going to be even better in year 2. They bring in the big linebacker from Maryland they like a lot. So I think on most weeks, they're just going to physically outman teams. So they may go 10-2, and they may get, it may be ugly against Ohio State because they just don't have the horses. And maybe they lose it to a USC or a Texas, obviously. But I think 10-2 is certainly plausible. And if this Michigan team goes 10-2, especially after being the reigning champs, they're getting in the Big Ten championship. Or they're getting into the playoffs, excuse me.
Yeah, going back to what you just said about being on the opposite end of the spectrum of maybe some of the national media, usually a pretty good place to be. Like usually, kind of being out there by yourself, usually some other people will come and join you as we see Michigan reel off a couple of big wins.
We'll see.
The quarterback is fascinating because the more I think about it, what you just said I think is on the money. Like, I don't know how much it really matters. Like Jack Tuttle, Alex Orji, Davis, like they won the Big Ten, and granted it was a different Big Ten back then, but like they won the Big Ten with Cade McNamara playing quarterback. Like, not to knock Cade McNamara, but if anybody, on this roster can do what he did in managing the game, and then maybe Alex Orji brings that Milroe-esque element you talked about, like it's going to be very intriguing. But I'm with you there. I think that's the one team where I'm like, man, if I could redo this, and I'm not backtracking here, but if I had to pick a team that I could add into like my field of 13, I think Michigan would be that team. You mentioned Texas. They're at the 5 spot. We agree they're going to be in the college football playoff. I guess my question is, how confident are you that the SEC runner-up will be in that 5 spot?
That's a great question. I think that if the records are fairly close, especially with a Texas, because they are going to Michigan. So not only are they playing this SEC schedule, and while their schedule isn't, akin to an Oklahoma's, which certainly got the short end of the stick in terms of the newcomers of the league, they still, they're playing Georgia. They got A&M. They have some other tough games on the slate. Oh, and you have to go, week 2 to Ann Arbor. So I think if it's a competitive game, whoever loses that SEC championship game, in all likelihood, is going to be that 5, maybe the 6 seed. Again, the way I did this was not exactly from that lens. I kind of did it using my preseason top 25, but the point still stands.
When you and I matched up on how many SEC teams we had in our playoff, I was like, hey, there we go, JD. There we go. 5 SEC teams. My thought was like, I just think they're going to have the best reference points when it comes down to like call it a 10-2 Penn State versus a 10-2 Missouri or a 10-2 Tennessee. What was your thought process in having 5 there from the old Southeastern Conference?
Yeah, but I kind of almost did like a light flicker myself when I realized I had 5, and I was like, man, is that one too many? Because even when you and I were in Dallas together, we talked about this. Like, is it 4? Is it 3? Is it, some people think it's 6. I think 6 is far too many. But when you think about the fact that there's 9 SEC teams in the preseason top 25, while the AP poll doesn't have any direct correlation to the actual rankings, we know that it sets a narrative. It does absolutely become kind of a template that the selection committee kind of uses as it then goes through the rest of its parameters. And it's not hard to see with Ole Miss's schedule, with Missouri's schedule, that if they win the right games and enough games, they're going to get in. And then Georgia, Texas, Alabama, it's hard to say that those 3 programs aren't going to get in. So I think a great example of this exercise and how it's illuminating when there was some pushback that, oh, you had 5 SEC teams. I had Tennessee ranked 12th in my rankings. They don't make it. Even though it's quote unquote a 12-team playoff, you have to kind of readjust, recalibrate your brain. It's not the top 12 teams. And so if it was the top 12 teams like Nick Saban wants, Tennessee or the SEC would have gotten 6 programs in. But it's not. So in the end, Penn State and Tennessee, for my teams, Big Ten, SEC, they ended up getting left out. And there was some pushback on that, but that's absolutely how it could play out this fall.
Yeah, speaking of getting left out, there were 2 teams that jumped out to me where I was looking for them, and I was like, are they on there? Am I missing them? And that's Miami and Notre Dame. Notre Dame makes me nervous. I don't know what to think of Riley Leonard. I think the schedule probably gets them in from where I'm sitting. Miami, though, with Cam Ward, you're maybe not as keen on the Canes as we sit here right now. What was the thought process with those 2 teams being on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I actually think Miami is frankly a little bit underrated in the preseason polls, but I think it's more of kind of a coin flip between them, Florida State, and Clemson in terms of who wins the league this year. And so I rode with the Noles just frankly because I think right now Mike Norvell's track record exceeds that of Mario Cristobal. Cristobal is a damn fine coach when it comes to January to September, building a roster and accumulating talent. It's those sticky Saturdays, from September to November that seems to give him a lot of problems. And so if we're talking about the margins there, I'm gonna roll with the Noles. But I could absolutely see Cam Ward having a phenomenal season. Miami, I don't think has had a 3,000-yard passer, which isn't even all that much. Since 2017. That's also the last time they won 10 games. So this certainly is setting up to be kind of an all-in season, not too dissimilar from Penn State, Ole Miss, Missouri, where this roster is going to look wholly different a year from now. So can they cash in? Can they capitalize? I'm with you on the Notre Dame skepticism. I do have them in the playoff because I think the schedule is extremely fortuitous. But that puts a lot of pressure on week 1. I think if you lose at A&M, even though you're going to be either slight dog or maybe coin flip favorite there, if you lose that game, there's not a lot of other really good teams on your schedule. I think you only have 3 road games all season. You pretty much have to beat Florida State and USC, I think, to get in.
I'm over here putting words in your mouth, Jesse. Yep, Jesse Simonton, he didn't pick the Irish. Notre Dame fans, go get after him. No, okay, so I missed that. You have them at 10. I totally looked past that. They're at the 10 spot. They would be going to Tuscaloosa that first round. Yeah, they're one of those teams that, I like them. I like the schedule. I think you and I are in lockstep here. If there was a team, I already told you, I think if I had to add a 13th team in, it'd be Michigan. Who's that team that you're like, man, I almost put them in. They were right there, but I just couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger?
Yeah, for me, it was either probably Tennessee or Clemson. Because while it is easy to poo-poo on Dabo's complete dereliction of duties in terms of using the transfer portal at all, I do think Clemson likes its 22. So if they can somehow survive these depth concerns that all these teams have, I could absolutely see the Tigers winning the ACC. I think it's easy to be a Cade Klubnik skeptic because we just haven't seen it. He is a 5-star that just hasn't quite lived up to the billing. But if Dabo kind of takes the handcuffs off, Garrett Riley, because that was not a Garrett Riley offense a year ago. That was still the Clemson putt-putt offense. And so if we can maybe take the driver out a little bit and start to get this thing going, then maybe Clemson, makes a leap offensively, because we know what they are defensively. They're going to be a top flight unit. And so I don't have a lot of concerns there. So I had Clemson just on the outside looking in, and I had Tennessee. I just think that, Nico is such an X factor. And then you talk about defense. I mean, Tim Banks, what he's done on a yearly basis, he's continued to progress for the Vols. I think this is the year everything kind of culminates. They've improved in like significant areas each season: red zone, third down. Now it's, can they shore up the secondary? If they do that, they absolutely can be kind of a sleeper contender. So Penn State fans will get mad because I left them out, but I'm still extremely skeptical about that offense. I got to see that to believe it.
Yeah, got to see it to believe it. Like, I like Drew Aller. I even like Colton Ecke. I just don't know who he's throwing the football to. Like, I have no idea who's going to be catching passes in Happy Valley with that whole deal going down. Even if they go 10-2, like what we just said about the SEC, I take a 10-2 Tennessee or a 10-2 Missouri over Penn State with a loss to like Ohio State and I don't know, Wisconsin. Like, I don't think they're getting in over that kind of outfit. Going back to what you said, Clemson with a putt-putt offense, like, I need to reload that, because that is, I think, the exact right way to put it. Because, like, we saw Garrett Riley, like, pretty much work magic at TCU, and then he gets to Clemson, and we're like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? We can't push the ball downfield. We're averaging like 6 yards a pass. What gives here?
I completely whiffed on that a year ago. I did think that Dabo, by going outside of the Clemson family tree offensively, I thought he had shown real growth there, and that he had admitted kind of, hey, yeah, I mean, Brandon Streeter's a good football coach, but like, it was just, it had grown stale there with Tony Elliott and Streeter and Jeff Scott. It was just too many of the same voices. And so to go make the splashy hire, it didn't work. And that surprised me, because I think very highly of Garrett Riley. So we'll see. To draw a line there, that's why I'm skeptical about Colton Ecke at Penn State this year. It's not that I have any doubts about him individually. What he did at Kansas was remarkable. But I think when the comments come out that James Franklin is still saying that this is going to be Penn State's offense, and, there's been far too many times in previous recent history where his own fingerprints, I think, have kind of gotten in the way there. That leads me to have some skepticism that they're going to suddenly make a massive leap.
It was kind of felt like when you hear Clemson went to the portal, you're like, oh, they went into the portal? Yep, got a portal quarterback. Oh, who'd they grab? Hunter Johnson. Well, wasn't he at – yeah, they went and brought him from Northwestern. He's actually back at Clemson now. It's like, well, you didn't really go outside of your way of doing things. You kind of just found a loophole to say you did, Not that they're trying to be deceptive by any stretch, but like, we're looking for growth here. So let's talk about your Final Four here, and then I want to give you the chance to tell the people who your national champion is. You got Georgia and Texas, Ohio State and Oregon as your Final Four in this college football playoff. Walk me through those matchups, and then tell the folks you have winning the whole darn thing.
Yeah, I think you and I are both on the same page that we expect multiple rematches this year. And that's from some of the top teams, because I think that, again, longest season in college football history, ultimately who has the best rosters and the best talent is going to win out. And so you could get a surprise team that maybe crashes the playoff that we didn't even mention here today, whether it's an Oklahoma State or a Texas A&M comes out of nowhere. Those two teams aren't winning the national championship. There's the playoff field may have expanded, but I think the teams that can win the whole thing has actually shrunk. And so while it may be a chalky Final Four, that's kind of the way I see it playing out. I think they're going to be a couple awesome helmet matches that we'll have seen earlier in the season, and we're going to see them again. And ultimately, I think Georgia is going to win the national championship, beating the Buckeyes like they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, we're in lockstep about Georgia winning the national title. And for the folks that are pushing back on like your group being like chalky, it's like, this is what the 12-team playoff is. Like, you think TCU's making the national title a couple of years ago if we have a 12-team playoff? Like, absolutely not. Like, they're not getting through that gauntlet of playing multiple SEC teams or Big Ten teams. So I think it's a great playoff, and I appreciate you breaking it down for us, man. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.